Hello, everyone. Well, today is going to be a very casual, meaningful change series event. I invite you to light a candle, snuggle in a blanket, enjoy a hot coffee or tea. I even turned my overhead lights off in the office and just have soft lighted lamps instead. I think today it's important to surround ourselves with things that make us feel warm and cozy and comfy. We were just discussing in the virtual chat room with Shelly earlier this morning that after the news yesterday of three beautiful children passing, that we just feel sad. I'm sad for the families that lost their children. I'm sad seeing my community sad, and I'm just sad. And one thing that Shelly and I have been chatting about a lot lately is that we're both trying to be better at allowing ourselves time to just be sad. Allowing yourself time to feel the feelings is not a sign of weakness, but so important to our mental and emotional well-being. These recent losses also remind me that I'm no longer the person I was before Stella's diagnosis. The things that I've been through, the old Casey couldn't have even fathomed. So when I think about why I can't just snap back to the old Casey again, thinner, less anxious, less triggered, more spontaneous, more energetic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I can't expect to go back to the person I was because I'm no longer her. Instead, I want to focus on restoring the current Casey. Shelly and I met our guest, Kara, during the Global Genes Conference in San Diego last fall. Actually, Shelly and I even had the opportunity to share our story on Kara's podcast called the Special Needs Mom Podcast that I think it aired in November, if I remember correctly. Then Shelly heard of a more recent podcast episode that hit on the topics we are actually going to discuss today, and she shared it with me. And as I was listening to that episode, I immediately thought, we have to have her on Meaningful Change. And here we are. So Kara, I'd love for you to take a few moments to introduce yourself, and then we can dig right into today's workshop.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and what an honor to be with you all here. And I thank you, Casey, for setting the stage and creating a space for this community to come exactly how they are. Mm-hmm. And, you mentioned about needing to learn how to process these emotions. That's really exactly what we'll be talking about today and the different stages that we look at. Mm-hmm. And quickly, for an introduction of kind of how I come to you. So I'm a mother of four. My kids range in age 15 to 5, down for my youngest, 3 boys and a little girl. And my 13-year-old is a multiple brain tumor survivor. His first diagnosis was when he was 2, and his most recent diagnoses of brain tumor were the fall of 2001, so a year and a half ago. As a result of his tumors, he has many disabilities. I don't know if it's a very good joke, but my joke is that he has a cornucopia of disabilities. There's so many areas where the impact of his cancer has reached. So, as a result of my journey that started, now 11, 12 years ago, I've experienced these stages that I'll be talking to y'all today. It's, I was going to say it's an honor to share them, but really it's actually a travesty, right? To be in these conversations. But one thing that continually gives me peace is being here together. So we'll find solace in that today. That's a little bit about me.
We're so happy to have you.
Thank you. Do you want me to get right into it? Is there any?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All right. Well, today, as Shelly and Casey and I designed kind of what we wanted to bring to y'all, the intention is to have it be very interactive, and to have you really participate in this conversation. So we'll be doing that by posting some opportunities for reflection in the comment section. And so I don't remember if it's Casey or Shelly or both of them are going to help read out those comments as they come in. And as time allows, we might have some time to have even more open conversation towards the end. But what we're going to go over today is what I call the restoration roadmap. And actually, specifically, I call it the evolution of a special needs parent. Oftentimes I actually say mom. I modified it for this because I want to make, it's really, the same for everybody, but I mostly work with moms. So I usually call it mom. But the evolution of a special needs parent is a 5-stage roadmap that I created after talking to mom after mom after mom and kind of seeing the commonality of the stages that I went through and am going through, and to kind of understanding where we all are. And actually, I'm going to share the screen as I go through this. I think I already have permissions.
Yeah, let me know for some reason if you can't, and then we can
do. So let me should just take a second. Shelly knows I finally did learn how to share my screen properly. Took me a few months. Oops.
There we go. That's perfect.
Okay. Let me see if I can get it a little bit. I don't know if that's too small.
I think that looks great if you want to center that up.
Okay, it'll work. We'll make that work. Okay. So can you guys see it okay? Is it big enough to read? Okay. Okay. So the evolution of a special needs parent, again, is a framework. And you'll see that I've written these 5 stages very intentionally in a circle. And it's really to illustrate that this is not a linear path or linear path. It really can go zigzag. Maybe I should even add some more zigzags to the circle. Yet I think it's helpful to kind of look at the processes kind of as we do move through them. So what we're going to do is we're going to first go through what I call the symptoms or the signs or the experience. We're going to look at each stage. And as we do that, the invitation I have to each of you is to identify where you might be at. And you might identify with several stages. Clearly there's no like distinct black and white line of when we move from one to another. So you might identify with some both. So there's no right or wrong way to look at this, but just kind of notice where you might be, because then after we go through this stages, the signs, the symptoms, we're going to also go through the second part, which is really actions, what I'm calling for evolution. And I don't know, that word's kind of weird to me, but I actually think it's really good, because in evolution, like there's nothing better necessarily about one stage or another. So wherever you find yourself in this stage, I really want to emphasize that it's not like, okay, we got to get to the end goal. And if we're not the end goal, we're not okay, because you're going to see, and I want to emphasize that we're going to be cycling back through all the stages all the time. In my own life, I might be in phase 5 in some areas, but probably still in stage 1 in other areas. So I just want to really acknowledge that like one is not better than the other. So let's look at the stages. So the first stage is what I call stunned survival. I'm going to see if I can actually make that a touch bigger. If it doesn't take me. Here we go. Okay. Stunned survival. So this is when everything's new. This is when you first have symptoms or diagnosis and you're learning a whole new language. You likely don't know anybody that has been in these shoes before. You'd have no community. And it's just all new. So you're very stunned. Nothing is normal. Your life has been turned upside down. And in this stage, often it's very, very typical to really focus on nothing else in your life, have tunnel vision, and like, this is what you're doing. And that's stunned survival. And it's funny because, this may last a couple weeks, it may last months or years. So there's no like right time, or there's no normal time for this. I think each diagnosis and condition really warrants its own timeline. And really, I think it's important to look at stunned survival, that we're really only thinking of day to day. Like our brain doesn't even care about the future, because it's really just like, how do I live? Or in other cases, how do I help my child live to the next day? And so it's really very, very focused. So that is stunned survival. And let's move on to the next stage, stage 2, which I call stabilized yet self-sacrificing. So this is when you have now your language, you've stabilized. You're like, okay, this is where we are now. I see where we're at. You have the language, the newness has worn off. So you might have your routines, you might have your doctors and your providers set up. And this is where you go into active mode, where you're like, all right, this is my war and I'm going to win it. And so this is where we're all in for helping our child. And this is, I think, a beautiful response of a mother and father. But again, I am a mother, that we dig so deeply when it comes like this. I think is a stage that we can kind of be harsh on ourselves. But what I want to highlight here is the depth of love and power that we have. And we see this as we give everything we have and more to our children in service of helping them. And that comes with this piece that can really just be very disempowering. And it's what I call if-then thinking. And when I'm talking to parents, a lot of times it's if my child, something that their child isn't doing and they want them to, or a diagnosis or something there that they don't yet have, then I will. And it's usually tied to our safety, our security, our happiness, basically all those things that we kind of want in life is tied and attached to what our child is or isn't doing. And so I totally get it. Totally get what it's like to have, these things that feel like, oh my gosh, how can I ever be happy again if my child's not doing this? However, it's just not helpful to attach our feeling to what our child's doing or not doing. So that's a hugely part of this stage, is really attaching those two together in a way that doesn't serve you or your child.
I feel like a
And-
lot of, oops, sorry to interrupt here. I was just going to kind of tag in. I feel like a lot of our parents, when they come to us, are probably in this stage. Like they've found us, they want to, like the cute syndrome, they're learning everything they possibly can about SE and AA and what are the things that I can expect and what can I be doing now? The conversations I need to have with my doctor. And like you said, this whole self-sacrificing element of this really hits home for me because nothing else matters, right? Like sleep and eating well and getting outside or having conversations with friends, like all that's gone because you were so honed in and focused on, being everything you can for your child. And I don't know about you guys, and you can feel free to jump in the chat. Like my if then thinking at the time was, well, if we can just get seizure control, then everything else will be fine. Like if we can get her seizures under control, then she has more chance of walking, talking, doing all those other things. And so that was one thing that I kind of like really held on to during those early times.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Casey. And even as you talk about that, it's like, we're going to talk more about like feeling the big feelings. Because gosh, when you talk about getting these things like seizure control under control, oh gosh, of course we want like that, desperate to get that under control. Like, and I have, different things for my child, but it's like probably the same depth of feeling in terms of a desperation and desire. So thank you for kind of just jumping in there. And just kind of lastly on this stage, we often lean on control for this, like that's kind of, and sometimes it's like almost like it's like the last source we have of power. It's like we have lost so much of control because we obviously cannot control the thing that's happening to our child. So we almost like pivot and the pendulum swings and we get very, very controlling. People around us probably are a better judge of this than we are because we think we're being really responsible and on top of it. And our husbands may not agree.
That's what I was going to say too, is like, I feel like a lot of times the mom take over everything and that we don't trust the husband or the dad to do anything. And, depending on the family dynamic, obviously. Right. But I felt like if there was a mistake, I wanted that mistake to be on me. So I wouldn't blame anyone else on that. And so I took control of everything, and which was obviously not the best way to go. And we'll talk about that later as far as actions for evolution. But that was one thing that I know for sure I did for the control aspect of that.
Yeah, totally. And then what's interesting is that's also paired with, I think, a lot of self-doubt in this stage, questioning self. Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing enough? Others, others can't do it as well as me. Like, so there's this dynamic of like, others can't do it as well as me, yet also I'm not totally sure I've got this either. And so it's really very unsettling. So that is phase 2, stabilized yet self-sacrificing. And now let's move on to the rebellion. I renamed a couple of these stages and I really like the new names, I have to say, because I love the rebellion. It's like this like pushback phase. And so the rebellion is kind of where we naturally kind of flow through some of these stages in some ways. And so you'll look, when I say actions, some of them you're going to say, well, I would never do that on purpose. And you're right. Some of them are going to be basically a default thing that you're doing or not doing, and some of them are going to be intentional. And I put both of them in here because I think it's important to kind of understand what we're doing that has us move through the stages. And so here we are at the rebellion. So the rebellion, you find yourself feeling really alone because you're like, wait a second, like I've kind of abandoned all my old community because they don't get it. And yet I don't totally have the new people. I don't totally have the depth and the solid, like in stage 1, I don't think I mentioned it, but like, that's when people rally around us like, oh, you got this new thing. We're going to support you. What do you need? And then they kind of get tired and they kind of wander away and think, oh, you're good. Okay. You're out of the hospital. Great. Okay. And so then we're here at this rebellion where like that help has fallen away, yet we don't have the new help. We haven't figured out how to really ask for help. So we end up feeling really, really alone. And, there's a story in our head of like, nobody, like there's a lot of stories that have us also feeling alone. And so, but we also like to a high degree, like people look at us and think she has got it together, she or he, I want to make sure I include everyone here. So you have this incongruency with how you feel inside and how people treat you and how people kind of relate to you. And so there's this rebellion of like, this doesn't feel good for me. I don't like this congruency. There's a lot of there's overwhelm in all the cycles. Like I almost want to say that's the overarching feeling, I think, for many, many of the stages. But I think in this stage, what we see is the pushback against the phase 2 of like, I can't do that forever. Like you get to kind of, you exhaust that part of you. And then you get to this resentment and pushback of like, I don't want to do that forever, or I can't do that forever, or it's not working. And I've given everything I've had. And so we end up kind of at this stage, like with this exhaustion and kind of like again, a desperation. This stage also will come with a lot of self-criticism and judgment. So we see, and we can see that in a lot of the stages, but I think this is when it starts to kind of bloom and blossom a little bit more.
I know one of the stories I feel like a lot of the time was in my head during that section was, why isn't anyone helping me?
Totally.
I'm overwhelmed. I'm tired, exhausted. Can't anyone see that? Why is no one helping me? And yet in the stage before, I took control over everything and wouldn't let anyone help. And so then, yeah, you just get exhausted and then you start playing all those stories in your head.
It's such a good one. Thank you for sharing that. It's really, really right on. So we move from the rebellion to what I'm now calling the restoration. I used to call this calm the chaos, but the restoration. And the restoration is when we start to really shift and to accept what is. I won't go into all the reasons now for sake of time, but a lot of times we don't realize that we're really resisting acceptance. And so this is when we actually start to experience acceptance. And this is for all the things. This is for yourself, your child, their diagnosis, for those unresolved things, that unanswerable questions. We just really settle into acceptance. We work to reinvent our identity. So along the way in the first 3 stages, a lot of what happens, especially in phase 2, is like our identity is stripped away from who we were to basically caretaker and or mom or an advocate. And those are titles we really never wanted. Probably mother, yes, but I don't know that I ever would have been like, I want to be a caretaker. And so we have identities that we don't want, but we really have couched or shelved all of the identities that we would have ever wanted for ourselves. So we find ourselves, kind of more in phase 3 is feeling like, who are we? We don't even know who we are anymore. So restoration is when we really kind of step in intentionally into that recovery of who we are. And again, I like to use the word restoration or rehabilitation more than recovery, because recovery insinuates that you're going to be who you were before. You're going to get that back. Whereas restoration speaks to, we're taking what's left over and we're making it like whole again. We're making it lovely again. We're not necessarily trying to get back to the original version. So also in restoration, there's just a restored relationship with ourselves, and then very much, following as restored relationship with others. Like Casey, I think, as you mentioned, is like, why isn't anyone helping me? Not great for relationships, right? But if we change that conversation that we're having in our head, it will definitely change how we relate to others. And when we relate to others as, okay, they're not helping me because they have no idea what's going on and I have not asked them, then our relationships dramatically change. Let's see. And then in this stage, there's a shift in the inner chaos. And with the acceptance, recognizes that, like, okay, the circumstances outside may never change. They are what they are, but that doesn't mean that we have to have a constant inner chaos because we're constantly being rocked about, like a boat in the ocean that's just going to and fro with anything that happens to us. Like, we have an ability to steady ourselves because of what we have developed. So that is restoration. Okay, and our last phase is power, peace, and possibility. So this is stage 5, and it's kind of almost like stage 1, 2, and 3 kind of have that almost like downward projection. Or stage 3 is that I feel like it's that change point. It's the catalyst that kind of launches us into stage 4 and 5. And stage 5 is really when you feel like you have control of your life in spite of those circumstances. Like I talk about that boat that's being tossed about, by the waves. The waves are the things that happen to us. And like, if we feel like we have no control over how we respond to that, it feels very, very chaotic. So as we progress, we learn the skills of actually being able to steady ourselves. And so processing deep and powerful emotions is very much part of this whole process. And in stage 5, we have the confidence that we have the ability to do this. We can really relate to ourselves as able and whole. And that feels much different than in some of the previous stages. Part of stage 5 is embracing that life is joy and sorrow. And I think, Casey, as you open the space today, like, sorrow is part of our life, and we learn to have a very new relationship with grief, one that actually recognizes it as the thing that actually connects us to both joy and sorrow. That sorrow is the thing that I think makes joy deeper, and that does not make any of this easy. Like, these are it's big games that I think we're playing over here, and again, it doesn't make it easy. So in stage 5, we recognize that we're actually dreaming again. We're hoping for future. We're playing. We're feeling fully alive. And we have a deep and well-connected community. Like, we have the restoration of not just ourselves, but ourselves in community, which I think is ultimately what we all want along all the stages. So we're going to pause from me talking, thankfully, and I want to put a question in the chat, or at least I'm going to try to. And we're going to do this question, and I'm going to try to chat it. Yay, it worked. Okay. So the question is, which stage resonates with you the most? And why do you think you are in this stage? So I'm hoping that you guys can chat it, or actually, we can even, Shelly or Casey, I will leave it to you. We can shout it out off of mute or put it in the chat. I guess whatever you feel most comfortable with. Yeah. But let's start with the chat.
Can you put the circle back on so we can see the
yes, the
names of them
stages
again?
This one? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
yeah.
Casey put the PDF in the chat too. So if you want the whole document, it's definitely there. But I'd love to share mine. And I definitely am, so happy that I'm really feeling the power, peace, and possibility as I'm moving out of the restoration. And I've been given the tools, and mostly from Kara personally, which has been an amazing journey over the last 6 months, but just even learning how to feel my feelings and express my needs. And then my own personal training on grief, to be able to, move through relationships that I've had, has been pretty awesome. And I do know that I definitely, in my journey, like I can see, almost predict moments that I'm going to be back in the rebellion or stabilizing, what events might put me back there, but also now having the tools to, be able to slowly move out and back into, being hopeful for the future and excited and doing amazing things. And I'm really happy.
Nice. Thanks so much for sharing.
I love how Gail put phase 4.5. And I feel like I'm there too. I'm like maybe in between the phase 4 and 5 right now, but I also feel like, man, I feel all these other ones. I remember so distinctly those different phases. So if you're here and you recently got a diagnosis and you're in stage 1, like there is nothing wrong with that. We have all been there.
And I also want to say, after this weekend, the differences of like going through my own grief this weekend, like I was dredging up all the things this weekend and then being notified, not 1, not 2, but 3 times of 3 very significant losses in our community, that yesterday I spent a lot of the day in self-sacrificing, just in denial, just definitely, what am I doing? Is it right? Am I making the right choices? I sat on the couch a lot yesterday, back into, my self-sacrificing behavior is sleep. I go to sleep, I lay down on the couch. I'm just going to go to bed. But, today having a really nice call with everyone and, getting my bucket filled again and, doing those bucket filling activities to kind of be like, no, there is possibility and we're going to move through this. But yeah, sometimes it's just a moment you slide back, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is I think that, well, and I think one of the things is when you, and we'll look at the action steps in a second here, as we learn the skills, as Shelley mentioned, we have this rich toolbox to be able to move through the stages. Because again, we will be cycling through these all the time. And, as we look at the actions in stage 5, like basically it's like, well, let's start all over again and let's go deeper. I would have said, 2 years ago, like, yeah, I'm like nailed it, but I'm like, I spent a long time, like in the last 2 years, like I've been, in all the phases significantly, for, I don't know how long, but, it's spending time in other phases and going deeper in them, which, I think also creates richness, but it's not easy either. Reading some of the
Yeah, I think everyone's kind of like also acknowledging I'm like in this moment, I'm in this stage. But if I don't have the nursing help, or if I don't have the help from, in-laws or parents, or if they're sick in the hospital, it's like easy to slip back into those earlier stages.
Yeah, definitely. And I relate to that. Some of my son's stuff is, I feel like there's some stage 2 stuff going on for me in terms of not having the answers that I think are going to help him, and how that I think impacts me. So certainly. Well, certainly keep having conversations in the chat. And let's actually now shift to looking at what I'm calling the actions for evolution. So these really are through the lens of things that, again, I want to emphasize, some of them are intentional and some of them are default actions or feelings. A lot of them are going to be awareness based. That is, how I support people is creating more awareness so that they can then take action and essentially transform how they're experiencing life. So stage 1 in the stunned survival, the actions are, it's adjust, it's respond, it's to quit your job, to take time off from your job, whatever the thing is that your life would require to support your child. That's what's happening in stage 1. Learn, research, and find out about diagnoses so that you can, again, help your child. And this one I think is important to mention. In stage 1, it's accept the support that's being offered. And this can both be default. You can just kind of be so in need that you don't even think about it. But it also can be intentional, where you intentionally lean into the support. I very much relate to that because, to 11 years ago, I was more in the, I don't know, I'll take anything, like didn't even think about it because I was so desperate. And this last go around, as I was able to reflect at a different level, I was very intentional about accepting the support that came in when it came in this stage 1, because this is the stage, especially if you throw out the C word, people are like, oh, you need help. Cancer is what I'm referring to. Oh, you need help. And they want to help you. So I was like, okay, they want to help me. I will take it. And as somebody, I think, Shelley, you mentioned like it's very difficult to accept help, especially in prolonged periods of time. I find that I'm pretty good for a little bit, but then I kind of get my, like, I don't know if it's my ego or something starts to pop up and I just get real tired of it. And I think it's a very vulnerable position to continually be accepting of help. So I'll pause that for a bit. And so the action that really kind of shifts us into stage 2 is we shift from that sprint to the marathon. The sprint is like everything's getting stabilized. And then we shift into the marathon, which is essentially kind of everything thereafter. Actions in phase 2. And actually, I want to have you, when you're listening to these actions, I want you to be kind of listening for what intrigues you or excites you, because it will give you an opportunity later on to say, hey, this is the thing, this is the next step for me, this is what I want to take on. And as a community, kind of like make some declarations. Shelley knows I'm all about like declaring what's possible in the future and then having that pull you forward. So these are the things that I think as a community, we can look at something really, really specific, even if it's very, very small. So even if you think of the smallest thing, perfect. Those count too. So stage 2, actions for evolution would be to recognize the self-sacrificing behavior, is just to identify what you're doing. Notice that you're not taking care of yourself. Notice that you're desperate for your child to change or heal or to have effective treatment. And so with this acknowledgement, with this recognition, we can then take back just a little bit for ourselves. And I want to acknowledge in this stage, we probably won't know how. You probably feel like it doesn't work. It doesn't matter. But to kind of stay in that conversation of taking back some for you. And I think I want to emphasize here that it doesn't mean that you're taking from your child. I think a lot of us, it's like, I'm not giving to myself because it'll take from my child. And that's just not how it works. One of the default actions I think that happens in this stage is we separate from our old community. We pull back from our relationships and we do look to find that new community, but we're kind of in this awkward middle space. Reflect on the disconnect from your internal state. So in this stage 2, especially, is when we're usually disassociated. We are still in that fight, flight, freeze, like kind of coming out of that stunned. And this is where things start to come back online in terms of our ability to feel. But recognize that in stage 1, we very much don't have the ability to feel, and our bodies have designed it that way because it would be too much at one time. So actions as we move from into stage 2 is when it's going to start coming back online, still very likely numb and unfeeling. But then in stage 3 is really when things start to come alive. That's why we start to feel so anxious and chaotic in stage 3. So we're going to notice and acknowledge this internal chaos that starts to come on. So just by actually saying that it's there, telling yourself, I see you, I see what's happening here, and we're going to look at this together. Okay, so that's actions for stage 2. Moving
I love
on to
talking about the acknowledgement too, because I feel like before, when I was maybe a little less mentally healthy, I didn't acknowledge that. And I'm like, why am I feeling like this? And now I'm finally like, okay, I'm feeling super anxious and overwhelmed right now, and maybe some anger. And that's probably because I put too much on my plate. I have too much going on right now. And so, yeah, being able to acknowledge is a big win.
Yeah. In all the stages. Yeah, for sure. Acknowledging, being able to see that and acknowledge it it's like it starts to develop in that stage 2, and then it strengthens as we continue along the journey. Okay. So in stage 3, the rebellion, is identify what's missing in your coping skills. Like in stage 3, you're going to be like, okay, see what's happening here. I'm acknowledging what's happening and I'm saying, I don't have the tools for this. Like I need them. I don't have them. So this is where the rebellion is actually when we see a shift in actually what you're doing. So you're going to look for and ask for help. you're going to recognize, okay, like I need help in learning how to grieve. So therefore, I'm going to take a class in grieving, or I'm going to join this community that's part of grieving, or whatever the thing is. You're going to actually shift into intentionally seeking out what you see for yourself. That comes along with finding your own voice. So rather than really being kind of, waiting for people to tell you what to do in terms of caring for your child, caring for yourself, you're going to shift and actually being able to find that within yourself, not from a, like you're not going to become a medical doctor overnight, but you're going to learn to trust your own wisdom. And that is a experience that can give you access to peace like no other. So you'll see this rebalance of a shift from giving everything to your child to what I would say give intentionally. Because in some cases, you're going to go back and say, I'm giving 110% to my child right now on purpose. And I know I can hold my breath for 48 hours in terms of what I need. And I'm okay with that. I'm accepting that. And I'm reliable to go find the help that I need to recover from the situation. And so I think it's important when we hear the word, I always, previously when I heard balance, I was like, okay, even Steven, 50-50, all kind of perfect. And so I think it's important to recognize balance is not that way. Balance is a lot of intention and a lot of actually acknowledging imbalances and accepting them on purpose. Again, with this pivot in the rebellion stage is when we're going to see the investment of time, energy, and sometimes money. So this might look like getting therapy. This might look like coaching. This might look like investing in a community that is supporting you. It could look like many, many different things, but not just investing in getting help for your child. I want to emphasize that because a lot of us, yes, that will help us tremendously, but that's not all the help that we need. This really is about helping yourself so that you can be the mom that can help your child, but really to be the mom or dad here, that can help themselves. Okay, on to stage 4. Okay. So we're going to step up and identify as a leader. I think oftentimes in the context of family, mothers and fathers do not say, I'm a leader, as they would as if they were leading an organization or a community. And I really relate to the people that I work with as leaders of their own life, leaders of their family, leaders of their community. And leaders make powerful decisions. They make powerful requests. Leaders do not wait for someone to tell them what to do. They create what's possible and then they figure out how to do it. So that's really a big part of this this restoration stage is the shift of how you relate to yourself and who you're being as a leader. So we're going to see the development of the skill of processing the emotions. So we're going to see the consistency start to develop of practicing the skill of processing anger, grief, resentment, sadness. And this will also open up the space to kind of actively cultivate joy and intentional play. It's so easy as moms, especially moms with children like us, to neglect the area of play. And we desperately need to intentionally do this because guess what? Like everything in us is kind of saying, no, you don't have time to play. Like this is serious now. Yet actually opening that access for us is opening space for a really, really healing and restorative place for us.
I'm going to interrupt and I was listening to your podcast a couple of weeks ago and you had a mother on that was really struggling with enjoying her time with her child. And I think, and same with a lot of us, that it's, identifying what hat you're wearing. Like, am I wearing a caregiver hat? Because inserting a catheter with a headlamp on is not fun, but it's part of my job. But later on in the night, when we're snuggling and putting to bed, I can be mom and, love on my baby. And same with like the wife hat versus, mom hat. Like I have to put my wife hat on right now because I need to, I think it's just identifying what needs to be done, what hat you need to wear to bring out joy. Because if you're like, I hate wiping, Nico, I hate it. but right now I'm being a caregiver. I put my caregiver hat on, and that's not supposed to be joyful. But when we play Mario Party, that's my joy, and try to intentionally have fun with him when it's the time to have fun.
Yeah, the episode you're referring to, we talk about, it's almost like this mom was expecting herself to love all of it. Like even love the parts like of wiping. And I think we could all name things that like if we could just say so, like we absolutely hate about caring for a child, whether it's just because it's watching them hurt or it's just gross. That actually it's okay to say, I don't like this part. And not that you're saying you're not going to do it, but it's actually okay to actually stay in that place. And that doesn't mean anything about your love for your child, about your commitment, any of it. So thanks for mentioning that. And, speaking of how we care for a child, asking and receiving support is a skill that's developed in the restoration. And this is one of those ones, this is one of those ones where I think we'll again swing. Sometimes it gets pretty exhausting to continue to ask for help and to try to find help when it's quite, hard to find. I think the part here that I think is important to recognize is it's the unstoppingness. Maybe you'll take a break. Maybe you'll give yourself a little bit of a breather, but your commitment is to be fully supported. And that's the piece here about the restoration piece that really has the restoration be part of your experience, and not just a temporary, kind of flash.
And I think for me, sometimes it's not asking for help, but it's actually even really identifying what do I really need in this moment or this week or, in this time period. It's like, things are going down, but what actually do I need help with?
Yeah. And that actually, I don't know if I mentioned it explicitly, but in stage 3 here, I think I might have missed it. I don't know where exactly it is, but identifying what you need is one of the things here. I thought it was in stage 3, but learning to identify. Because if I asked any one of you right now, if you shared a little bit about your life and I said, what do you need? You'd probably be like, like it's a little awkward. You're like, I don't know. Or the things that you think you need, you automatically disqualify because you already decide they're not possible. Right. So if I'm like, I need a house cleaner right now, I'd be like, well, I have all the reasons why I can't have a house cleaner. And so I wouldn't even dare to need it or to say that that's what I need right now. So it's hard to identify a need that you don't see how to meet. But the point is to identify what you need and to be an inquiry of how can it be met? What would need to happen to have this need be met? And again, it's very vulnerable to identify a need that you don't know how to meet yourself. But also with this restoration stage is you have an expanded network of support for different areas of your life. So not just for, just for all the areas, you have the confidence that you have people to reach out to and lean on for support. Some people in relationship to all the things that your child needs, and some things just totally unrelated. It doesn't matter, but you have a very deep and wide bench. Okay. And last phase here, it's not allowing me to keep scrolling. You'll see the continuation, the continual evolvement of the stages, the deepening and growing that I mentioned before. You get to identify those areas that you don't feel empowered, right? So it's like stage 5 doesn't mean perfection. It means that you have the ability to continue to look at all the different areas and say, oh, this one area is kind of something feeling off there. And so you're going to go and do the work to understand what's happening for you, to really shift that experience from disempowered to empowered, or whatever the experience that you're having and want is. A shift here in stage 5 is shifting to serve others. As we have full tanks, as we have what I say would be well sourced, we then actually can give. Not always, right? Because we're going to be going through these phases, and sometimes in some stages we're like, no, actually I need help right now. But the overall experience is that you are available to serve and support others. And that to me feels like, kind of what more do I want in life? To be able to bring my story and serve others. That sounds pretty good to me. And then constantly expanding our capacity. So this also refers to kind of the ever expanding, but really also, in love and vulnerability. So these two things are going to pair together and kind of allow us to go deeper and deeper and deeper. So I'll ask a couple of questions. And why would you, would Shelley or Casey read some of the chats if that feel applicable, just to kind of bring that discussion as I get the other question up? Can you do that?
Let's see. We were talking, it looks like there's been, a couple people mentioning that when things didn't go how they thought they wanted it to go. Heather talked about how she had a family movie night planned, and then Tate had a completely different plan for the night. And so she kind of abandoned that and went into something that would kind of help her anxiety, because she had found herself, kind of getting to a point of either blowing up or almost blowing up. And Karen kind of mentioned that too, that in the past, when things were not going how she planned, she would kind of go off the deep end, get stressed and angry. But now that she's kind of taken some things off of her plate, she's retired from being a nurse. And now it kind of sounds like you've taken maybe some hats off, right, Karen, where before it felt like you were wearing too many hats, and now you can kind of take one of those hats off, to where you can find more of a balance.
I like, Karen, how you mentioned the anger has lessened, but the lashing out is less. The lashing out piece is usually a response from untended emotions, right? So they come exploding out and often blaming others. And that's really, it's very, very common for, I think, all people, but I think especially for us, because there's so much going on inside of us. And there's so many big emotions that we're processing all the time. Not just like, hey, here's one like this month. It's more like all the time, every day. So thanks for sharing that. So the question I would love you guys to reflect on is, which action inspires or interests you the most, and why? So if anything, you're like, hey, there's this one thing, maybe I want to kind of take on something in this area. And so just kind of share. And then what I'd love to do, as time allows, is actually identify a specific action, one specific action that you would like to take on, and kind of declare to this community that that's your next step. So it can be, even if you're like, well, I thought I was in phase 5, but there's a stage 2 action. Don't worry too much about that, but just worry about like, what was the thing that like kind of sparked something like, oh yeah, like I kind of want to work in that area. So let's share in the chats as those come up. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the smaller, the better. Sometimes it's as simple as, I'm going to drink some water today. I'm going to look at my hydration. These don't have to be big things. It could be noticing, how you're talking to yourself, small things. So thanks for sharing, Heather. So it says, I think my next step is to actively work on playing with Tate more. Sometimes I do the caregiving role too much. Oh my goodness. Yes. Yeah. So I think that is a really, really good one. And so for that, Heather, I would invite you to think about like, what do you need to have in your space? What do you need to create for yourself to kind of create the environment into which you can actually play? So you'll know what that is more obviously intimately than I would, but I feel like for myself, if I'm asking myself to play and yet I'm in like my office, I'm going to be like, oh, there's that one email over there. Or I don't know. There's going to be distraction, right? So for me, being able to play with my child sometimes would be easier if I leave my home, or if I do something that I actually like to do. Like I like doing Play-Doh with my kids. I do not like playing make-believe. So like creating something that actually you enjoy in service of your play with your child, not just your child's play. Okay, good. Some other things here. Danielle was typing the same thing. Since Lucy's been going through a difficult time, I've not felt connected to her as a mom. Yeah, I can see that, right? We're so focused on all the things that we forget that there's this like being right there that like actually wants to connect with us. And a big part of that is actually there's like, being available for connection yourself. Connection is very hard when we're stuffing down our emotions, when we haven't integrated that. So coming from a place of connectedness will require you to be connected to yourself. So that's, again, part of the work that kind of 3, 4 in, stages 3, 4, 5 that is really developed. Anybody else have any specific actions? I have play, connection, identify and give yourself what you need, not what I think others need to me too. I don't understand that last part. Not what I think others need.
That was me. I'm trying to type and read at the same time.
know, right?
Where I have a hard time with is identifying exactly what I need in that moment. And that might be, I need to just sit outside by myself with no one else around, instead of, well, I think I'd be my son would rather come out with me, or maybe I can include someone else with me because that's what I think they need or what I need to be for them. And so instead of me always trying to think of everyone else, every so often it is completely okay to say, I don't want to do that right now, but I would really like to do this. This is what would fill my cup in this moment.
Nice. Great one. Yes. So good. It's like almost like it takes so much intention to just pause and give yourself what you need, because it's the default is so quick to just jump to others. So, even if you all have not typed it into the chat, here's the thing that I would again invite you to is to just get a little bit even more specific, as in decide when you will do this thing, create some space for it. And actually even like, because it's easy to say, oh yeah, I'm going to go drink more water. And then, but if we don't plan to do it, it's very likely that nothing will shift for us, that we'll just it'll be a nice idea, but nothing will change. And so like a very silly example, I just happen to want to have water here, is to say, okay, today I'm going to drink this water by noon. I'm over here on West Coast time. And then I'm going to have one more by the end of the day today. That's very specific. I know exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly what would actually have my intention of drinking more water fulfilled. And so using the example of playing with your child, the thing I would have you think is, okay, when and what does that look like exactly to you? So let's just say you did decide, hey, I'm going to go outside the house if that's feasible for you. So I'm going to do that. Okay, I don't have any appointments on Friday. I'm going to do it on Friday. And I'm going to allow myself 2 hours to enjoy the whole experience. And I'm going to make sure that I turn off my phone during those 2 hours so I don't get any doctor calls. I don't have any emails distracting me, that I am fully available to play. And then you might even recognize, okay, and I actually even need to do I may need to ask for other support with my other children, if you have other children, to make sure that they're not going to interrupt me and your special needs child, because it takes that much focus. I don't know. I'm obviously making all this up. You would know that for you. So I would invite you to really look and make this real and schedule it. Maybe even putting a reminder on your phone just to have a check-in. So Casey, for you, it's like, okay, like looking at what you need. Maybe every day after you kind of get everyone off and organized, then that's when you check in with yourself. Okay, what do I need right now? Maybe before starting your workday, what do I need? And you just carve out that 5 minutes to check in with yourself. And you might say, I just need to take a couple deep breaths.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I need right now. Or you might say, gosh, I need to go on a vacation for 2 weeks. And then you might be like, okay, well, that's not going to happen today. But you might say, hey, I'm going to have a conversation about how we can get away. So let's have that conversation tonight. So it doesn't mean that like immediately we're going to just get to go meet every need and, it's going to be done like a light switch. But I think the value here is continuing to acknowledge them. So those are just a couple examples. So anyone else have any, actually, I'll open it for questions. If there's nobody else that wants to share kind of the things that they're taking on, open it for questions, comments, and anything that you, Shelley or Casey, would add.
And I would like to maybe just have a few minutes for you to talk about the Pathway to Peace program. And then we can kind of share with our families here our big news of the things that TCSF wants to do with that partnership.
Okay, awesome. Well, if anyone has a question, pop in. Otherwise, I'll start talking about that. So put it in the chat, and then as time allows, we'll go to your questions. But what Casey's referring to is the coaching program that I've developed. So it's called Pathway to Peace. And it's a 6-month coaching program that takes the combination of coaching, which coaching is in its simplistic form, is creating awareness. It's helping us look at what's happening over here by service of reflection, and having somebody help reflect that to us. When we look in our own mirror, we like can't see what's going on behind here. You know, we might think, oh man, my hair looks great back there. But you look in the mirror like, oh wow, I did not realize that was happening. So that's really what coaching is. And when we become aware of something, that gives us access to choice. So that's the power of coaching. And we do it in a group format for a lot of different reasons, but mostly because community is so important to this population, that we've lost so much community, that doing the work of grief and this deep dive is so powerful in community. So coaching is the lead pony, as I say, but there's also like a plethora of content that teaches the skills. So it's like at the end of this program, the toolbox is like overflowing. Like probably I should have pared it down a little bit. But there's just so much that I've learned along the way that I feel like, you know, not everything will be the right thing for every person. But I think I look at it as almost like playing bingo with all the things that you have. It's like, okay, well, that one, you know, G5, that worked today. And then learning all the different squares. You have so many different options to, you know, win. I played bingo on a cruise recently. It was so much fun. But really, that's the program. So it's a 6-month program. It's a group coaching program. And Casey, do you want me to share a little bit about the partnership, or you want to jump in?
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically what we came up with is recognizing how cool would it be if everybody that shares a diagnosis gets to go through the program together. Because when I have the through my program, it's a culmination of all the different people with all disabilities, and it's wonderful. But I had a thought one day, I'm like, how cool would it be if like everyone from the same community that's already connected doing this together gets to go through this program together. So essentially, the community has opened up some seats to be able to support and sponsor. You'll have to say exactly how it works out in terms of that. But so I think there's a sign up today in terms of if you're interested and want to know more information about it, if you want to sign up, then that's an opportunity that y'all have, which is actually really, really exciting.
Yeah. So Karen and I and Shelly and I, we kind of looked at, the budget and what we wanted to do. And so essentially TCSF will sponsor fully sponsor up to 7 participants in your coaching, but we can have more than 7. And so if you look at this, we're going to have a sheet where we'll have all the pricing and things like that on there for you to sign up. If you're able to pay for it all yourself, great. If you're able to only put towards, a certain amount of money towards it per month, or if you need a full sponsorship from the TCSF, then you'll have those opportunities to put that in the sign up sheet. So we would love to offer this to as many people as possible, or at least the cap to the group. Kara might at some point in time be like, we might need to do this a different time. We also have the dates and the times and what the time commitment's going to be. That way, you know exactly what you're going into before. We want to make sure everyone feels that they have the time and the space to be able to commit to it. So we're going to roll that out as soon as we're done today. So if you have any questions about it, Shelly would be a great resource because she's done it. I think you're in your last month. Is that correct, Shelly?
Yeah, I think next week is my last full session. So I know.
Yeah.
So I've done the full 6 months. It was a huge investment thinking about it personally, and I would do it all over again because the tools in my tool belt have definitely benefited my life and my decisions and the ability to get through fun moments, tough moments. I have a lot of tools now and knowledge that I didn't know about some of the emotions that I had or wasn't able to express. Now I feel the ability to do so. And I did it with a group of strangers, and the women were amazing and awesome. Because everyone obviously, even through, we all know, even in our 8A community, we're all so different. Our children are so different. It's our different experiences definitely brought light to a lot of things, and it was amazing.
Yeah, good point, Casey. So this is different than in my own community. It's open to mothers and fathers or caregivers of any form, is my understanding. And how cool would that be actually to have even a mom and dad do it together? Like both parents, that would be amazing, right? To have those conversations in your home. So I will be available for questions on that. So you can connect the community if they have questions specifically for me. You'll figure out how to direct them. But thank you so much. I know we have to wrap up. Actually have Pathway to Peace coaching next.
Right now.
I know, right? I'm like, oh.
So I do have a quick question. Are you doing, if someone has a lot of questions, could we direct them to do somewhat of like an intake call with you where they can talk to you like I did when I was trying to decide if it was right for me?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So what I'll do is I'll send you guys a link to schedule time with me. And so I'll just have that available. So if someone has questions, they want to say, hey, I want to talk about this a little bit more. Am I right fit? I can just schedule one-on-one conversations. That sounds appropriate. But we want to, act on it because we want to make sure that we get everyone that wants to be in ready by the time it
It's
starts.
going to be, starting soon in May. So we'll again, all that will be posted here in a second once we get off the call, but it's going to happen soon. So super exciting. Well, no, Carrie, you had to jump off. I'm just going to close up real quick to say thank you to our sponsors. We have Praxis and Neurocrine that have sponsored a Meaningful Change series, but Neurocrine actually sponsors our social and emotional programming. And so it's due to part of their sponsorship that we're able to provide this awesome Pathway to Peace connection partnership with you. So all right. Well, Kara, thank you so much for coming on today and staying late and talking to us. I think we could probably talk about this for hours and hours, but we shoved a lot of information into a short amount of time, and we will be in touch once we get our cohort ready to go.
Okay. That sounds amazing. All right. Thank you all for letting me join you today. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kara.
See you.
All right. Everyone, Shelly and I will be posting here shortly about how to sign up for this Pathway to Peace, and then we'll be available for questions on Facebook or through email whenever you guys are looking at the information, but we're really excited about it. So, all right, well, have a wonderful day, and we will see you next week when we have a panel discussion with Neurocrine Biosciences. We're going to have industry, clinicians, and caregivers all together to really talk about what meaningful change means to each of us and what surviving to thriving means to everyone. So I'm pretty excited to have everyone in the same room talking about these important topics. So, all right, guys, well, we'll see you next week.